You think you know your neighborhood, until one house changes everything. Tucked inside a quiet suburb of Belgrade was a home that didn't just hide secrets, it concealed something far darker. At first glance, it looked completely normal. But hidden behind the garage wall was a soundproof room, what police would later call a slaughterhouse. And they weren't exaggerating. In 2021, Serbian authorities made a discovery that still haunts them. An industrial meat grinder sitting at the center of a room designed to make people disappear. Literally. This wasn't some movie prop. It was used to dismember, decapitate, and grind human bodies, erasing every trace of the victims. The remains? Dumped like trash into the Danube River. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. The killers weren't trying to hide it among themselves. They documented the entire thing, every gruesome detail, on encrypted phones. Not to confess, not out of fear, but to brag, to intimidate rivals. They sent photos to mock their victims and show off what they'd done. And if you're wondering how they thought they'd get away with it, well, they were using Sky Global phones. Devices sold as uncrackable, promising secrecy with self-destructing messages and remote wipes. But their confidence would come back to bite them. This wasn't just murder. It was methodical, organized, and backed by people who believed they were untouchable. But how did police finally discover this horror chamber? And what happened when the truth started to crack open? Stay with me, because what comes next involves encrypted messages, deadly rivalries, and a twist that reaches the highest levels of government. For a while, it looked like they were in the clear. No witnesses, no evidence, no bodies. Just a soundproof room and encrypted phones that promised silence forever. But here's the twist. They weren't as untouchable as they thought. The killers relied on Sky Global phones, a brand marketed as the gold standard in privacy. These devices came with features like self-destructing messages, remote wipes, and military-grade encryption. If you had one, it meant you had something to hide. And by 2019, European authorities were catching on. Law enforcement noticed that these phones weren't showing up in average citizens' hands. They were mostly being used by criminal networks, drug dealers, human traffickers, and, as it turns out, people running human slaughterhouses. Then came the breakthrough. In 2020, French authorities located a Sky Global backup server, a hidden vault of criminal conversations. Once they cracked the encryption, the floodgates opened. Over 2 million messages suddenly came into view. Conversations once thought lost forever were now out in the open, raw and unfiltered. Serbian police received a massive cache of this decrypted data. What they found wasn't just disturbing, it was horrifying. Photos of tortured victims, execution orders, bragging messages, and chilling instructions on how to use the grinder. Each message painted a clearer picture of the monster behind the curtain. Most importantly, it gave them names. The faceless killers were suddenly exposed. They weren't just ghosts. They had addresses, vehicles, and routines. The technology meant to protect them had now flipped the script. And just when investigators thought they'd seen the worst of it, the messages led them somewhere darker, somewhere much higher up the food chain. So who was behind this nightmare factory? Meet Veljko Belivuk, the man Serbians called Velja Nevolja, or Trouble. And the trouble was exactly what followed him. He ran a group known as the Principi, a violent offshoot of the Kovac clan, one of the most dangerous criminal syndicates in the Balkans. Their main enemies? The Shkaljari clan, a rivalry soaked in blood, drugs, and power. But Belivuk didn't recruit career criminals. No, he handpicked his crew from a different battlefield, the football stands. Partisan hooligans are young, angry, and already used to violence. These weren't just fans. They were ready-made soldiers, loyal, brutal, and eager. Their chilling motto? Nobody, no crime. That's what made the secret room so important. It wasn't just for killing, it was for erasing. With nobody, There was no trail, no closure, just a void. And they used it well. Let's talk about the victims. The first, one of their own. A man suspected of betraying Belivuk. They didn't just kill him. They made an example of him. They carved traitor into his back, decapitated him, and fed his remains into the grinder. His body ended up in the Danube. His name was never spoken again. The second, a rival, a member of the Shkaljari clan. He was lured in with false promises and then beheaded without hesitation. But the real punch? He sent a photo of his severed head to his boss, not just to gloat, but to send a message. We're watching you next. And the third victim? This one's even darker. He wasn't a rival. He wasn't even a threat. Just a friend of a gang member. Someone who trusted them. They invited him over, laughed with him, and then turned on him like a pack of wolves. He was mocked, tortured, and killed, his death captured in photos that were then shared in their Sky chats like it was just another meme. Each murder wasn't just an act of violence, it was a performance, a warning, a trophy. And what made it worse? They felt untouchable, protected, because the more investigators dug, the more signs pointed toward the very institutions meant to stop them. In the next part, how high did the protection go? Was the government just watching, or were they part of the operation? You won't believe who was on their side. Eventually, the blood trail became too obvious to ignore. With decrypted Sky messages, witness statements, and even CCTV footage, Serbian police had enough to move in. Belivuk and his gang were arrested in 2021. The untouchable crew was finally behind bars, or so it seemed.
Danas smo razgovarali o razbijanju kriminalne bande Belivuk Miljković i sa velikim ponosom mogu da kažem da je ova banda razbijena.
Dakle, ono što je naša poruka. Sa ovom bandom smo završili.
But here's where it gets twisted. Veljko Belivuk, despite mountains of evidence, claimed he had nothing to do with the murders. No involvement, no orders, nothing. His trial is still ongoing, and in court, he's painting a very different picture. One that doesn't just deny the crimes, but shifts the spotlight upward. Because this story doesn't stop with the gang. It goes much higher. Secret WhatsApp chats, leaked to journalists, expose something shocking. Belivuk was in direct contact with police officials. Not just low-level officers, but people with power, access, and authority. They weren't chasing him. They were protecting him. One name in particular jumps out. Nenad Vučković, a member of the Serbian gendarmerie. In a leaked recording, he's heard discussing logistics with Belivuk's men. He wasn't stopping the killings. He was helping them operate safely. Then there's Dijana Hrkalović, the former deputy police chief. She wasn't just aware of the crimes, she actively hid evidence that linked her to Belivuk. Her job was to uphold the law. Instead, she used it as a shield. She was arrested, but not for long. Just a brief stint behind bars for abuse of office, then released like nothing happened. But the biggest shock? Belivuk testified that he worked for none other than President Aleksandar Vučić himself. According to Belivuk, he did favors for the government, dirty favors, and in return, he got protection. Whether that's true or just a desperate ploy, the government scrambled to silence that testimony. They called it fake, politics, a distraction. But let's be honest. Why would a man already facing life in prison risk lying in court about the president? This wasn't just a criminal enterprise. It was a network with roots in law enforcement, intelligence, and politics. And the scariest part? That room in the garage might be locked now, but the people who enabled it, many of them are still free. Today, only Belivuk's gang sits behind bars. The officials who enabled them, still walking free. Stevan Dojcinovic, a brave investigative journalist, uncovered the threads connecting Belivuc to Serbia's state apparatus. His reporting exposed the rot, but the system barely flinched. Despite overwhelming evidence, no legal action has been taken against high-ranking officials. No charges for Herkalovic, no disciplinary response for Vučković. And from President Vučić, not a word. We reached out to all three. No responses. This wasn't just about crime. It was about power, silence, and control. And the scariest question remains. If the killers had help from the top, who's really in charge? If this story shocked you, share it. Let people know what's happening behind the headlines. And if you want more raw, unfiltered breakdowns like this, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started. Stay curious, stay sharp.